In a curious development, analysts for the vase scan team are now distancing themselves from some claims regarding the allegedly ancient vases. Having used a very high-end scanner, Dr. Max Fomachev's verdict is that the vases in the Petrie Museum are handmade. Mark Kvist, who in 2023 detected all sorts of magical math in the original vase, has now retracted his claim of the radial traversal pattern. Along with Steen Gerdes, the original analyst for the team, all three now doubt the authenticity of the OG vase. Let's take a closer look. For brevity, we shorten the vase scan team as just VST. We don't speak Danish, and some people suggest that Steen is a woman's name. We don't know that person, so we'll refer to Steen as he or she. If you want to see more videos, please like and subscribe. VST set out to scan hard stone vases, claimed to be ancient Egyptian. According to VST, some of such vases exhibit uncanny precision. Also, their dimensions supposedly encode hidden constants and math formulas, and their age goes back as far as 14,000 BC. The original claims about the vase's origin involved an unknown ancient advanced civilization with computers and 5-axis CNC machines.
You can't explain this except with advanced tooling. To make a 5-axis mill that can make something like these vases with the precision it has requires an enormous industrial civilization to get all the metals, to manufacture all the stuff, to have all the precision, to make the bearings like Chris was telling you. It's not a simple task. Any 5-axis tool has to be controlled by something like a computer.
Lately, the original claims have been reduced by about 10 orders of magnitude. Now the claim is a possible earlier use of lathe in Egypt.
Like you said, it is simple. All it requires is a lathe, which, supposedly wasn't used for these, but clearly was used for these. There's the tool marks on the inside that prove that a lathe was used.
No, the tool marks only indicate rotational motion of some kind. They don't prove that a lathe was used, though it may have been. Steen Gerdes, a former analyst for VST, recently published an analysis which concludes that vases in the Petrie Museum were handmade. Steen also dishes the dirt on VST. Here are the juicy parts according to Steen. Adam Young claimed that Petrie Museum required a review of data before any publication, and thus Steen couldn't publish anything. Steen contacted Petrie Museum and was told that no such stipulation had ever existed. At Cosmic Summit 24, Adam Young showed data from a misaligned scan, labeled incorrect by Steen, to make a CNC replica look worse. For the PV6 comparison, Adam Young swapped the data for PV2 to make PV6 look better. Steen calls VST's geometric mean method a meaningless charade, which can be manipulated. It's so dependent on alignment that simply rotating the vase by 0.05 of a degree can alter the precision score by 17%. Steen says that for some vases, original CT scans look different than what's posted online. This is hard to judge from outside, without knowing all details. CT scans can be provided as volumetric data and thus require meshing. Depending on details and scale, some algorithms can optimize or regularize a polygonal surface without altering the measured precision. When applying such algorithms, care should be taken to preserve the measured precision. Supposedly, outsiders can now review the process, so they can ensure that the surface is not modified in a way that affects measured precision. What is concerning is that on 2 versions of the same scanned mesh, the detail in the damage pattern changes. Mesh processing algorithms can make the details in the damage patterns look a bit blurry, but they shouldn't change the damage pattern entirely, as if we were looking at different surfaces. This image highlights the differences in the damage pattern. It's not clear what's going on here. Maybe the pattern was flipped 180 degrees. Steen says that Matt Bell stipulated that all findings on Bell's vases had to be cleared with Bell first. The irony here is that VST has long criticized Egypt for forcing foreign archaeologists to clear all new findings through Egyptian authorities. Seems like gatekeeping is okay if VST does it. As far as the so-called radial traversal pattern embedded in the shape of the vase, Steen shows that matching circles to round features on the vases is so subjective that you get whole ranges of quote-unquote matching circles. Then you can data dredge all these circle ranges to find some quote-unquote formula connecting their radii. In a past episode, we already showed how you can find functions that link completely random values, if these values belong to some general type of distribution. And in some cases, not just one function, but several functions. Based on Steen's analysis, Mark Kvist has retracted his claim of radial traversal patterns. In a separate development, Dr. Max Fomitchev, who apparently has plenty of disposable income, used a very high-end scanner on the vessels in the Petrie Museum. His verdict is that vases in that museum match modern, handmade vessels.
I can speak about the objects from the Petrie collection that they appear to have been handmade, unquestionably handmade.
Steen agrees with Dr. Fomitchev that the vessels in the Petrie Museum are consistent with handmade objects. Steen's graph shows that the precise vases from private collections are outliers, very distinct from museum pieces. To sum up these developments, it seems that VST is essentially splitting up into two camps. On one side are people with scientific background, who are willing to report data honestly, and who can walk back their old claims. This group will probably soon move on to other subjects, disappointed with the museum results. The other side are people with other agendas, to expand YouTube channels, collections of mysterious items, or get attention with convention speeches. This group will likely try to milk this so-called vase mystery for as long as possible. Even though they've walked back some of their claims, both Steen and Kvist still cling on to the notion that finding math constants or their derivatives in dimensional ratios of the OG vase is unusual. To make the case, Steen presents what's described as a rigorous probability model. Unfortunately, this model is rigorously wrong. To present this model, Steen offers a script which counts the odds of math constants or derivatives that have already been found. This is a classic Texas sharpshooter fallacy, firing bullets at a barn, then drawing a target around the tightest cluster you found, and claiming unusual marksmanship. It's not how probability works. You don't count the odds of a particular outcome, which has already occurred. You count the odds of all similar outcomes, which may have occurred. Counting the odds of what has already been found is the math equivalent of drawing a target once the bullet holes already exist. Ask yourself, why only search pi over phi, which has occurred, but not phi over pi, which also may have occurred? Why only phi squared or phi cubed, but not pi squared or pi cubed, which may have occurred? Why only pi or phi? Why not the Euler number, or the square root of 2? To get it right, you need to do what we did in a previous episode. Use all math constants and all their derivatives that you would have found interesting. If you do this, you'll find out that finding a few of them is almost guaranteed to occur in the tested range. Also, to compute probabilities, Steen unnecessarily uses Monte Carlo. Monte Carlo just means running lots of simulation trials, 100,000 in this case, to gauge the likelihood of something. This is completely unnecessary here, just like it's unnecessary to count the odds of getting tails for a fair coin. The math is simple. One specific outcome divided by two possible outcomes, or 0.5. There's no need to run thousands of simulations to establish this. Simulations are needed only when odds cannot be easily computed due to complex behavior, etc. But in this case, we have a known range, a known set of specific outcomes, and known error margins. The probability here is thus a simple division of the sum of relevant outcomes by the range. That's it. There's no need to run 100,000 simulations. Finally, a quick technical comment. The analysts involved with VST seem to lack experience with 3D geometry. To find the most optimal orientation of vase in 3D, they engage in time-consuming random searches.
I ran my code and it took a few hours to get the results, because one of the important parts of analysis was to make sure that the object is optimally positioned vertically. And because there are many ways an object can be oriented, I had to explore rather significant parametric space of all possible tilts of an object to get the optimal alignment. And that what takes, most of the time.
For those experienced with 3D geometry, this aspect is actually simple and can be done without random searches. Steen correctly points out that VST obfuscates the real extent of deviations by reporting deviations as median RMS. In real metrology, surface quality is reported as absolute peak-to-trough values because they show the raw, naked truth without hiding behind any statistics.
So based on the size and the grade, the overall flatness tolerance for this plate in accordance to the standard is 180 millionths of an inch. That tolerance applies across the entire surface of the plate and is a maximum separation form tolerance. From the highest peak to the lowest valley, the entire surface must lie between those limits.
VST keeps comparing the vases to aerospace parts.
Any time somebody creates a precision part, say for the aerospace industry, this is the exact sort of procedure that you would put it through.
Yet when it comes to reporting results, aerospace metrology is suddenly abandoned and results are hidden behind medians. Here's a simplistic illustration of how much a median and peak to trough can differ. In our context, median is a scalar that represents both plus and minus deviations. As you can see in this simple example, the median, in red, is only about a quarter of the full peak to trough range, in yellow. Reporting medians thus sounds more impressive, precision-wise, because many people unfamiliar with statistics will intuitively take this value to mean peak to trough, which is false. Both Steen and Dr. Fomichev propose their own precision factors. Such factors are indeed useful for cluster analysis. But when reporting numbers to the public, such factors obfuscate reality as much as medians. What most lay people intuitively grasp the best is the absolute deviation range, aka peak to trough. To cut through all these medians and factors, here are the surface deviations shown directly, so you can see them with your own eyes. For each vase, we unraveled a few random circular slices onto linear segments. We'll ignored areas near the lug handles, the top lip, and the foot. All graphs use the same vertical scale. On top is the obsidian shot glass by Bison Hill Stoneworks, the most precise hardstone vessel measured in this context. At the bottom is the most precise hardstone Egyptian vase traceable to a specific tomb, with a peak-to-trough range of just under 1 millimeter. This is a typical modern mass-market granite vase turned on a lathe. This is the OG vase from the art market, not traceable to a specific site. Needless to say, it's very different from a verifiably authentic vase. The OG vase is in the same class as a modern turned granite vase. Just under 1 millimeter in deviation range is an excellent result for a handmade vase, but it isn't necessarily the limit of handmade precision. There are a few methods which, with lots of time and patience, could perhaps bring handmade vases down to about 0.2 millimeter in deviation. Illustrating these methods would require 3D visuals, so this will have to wait for another video. VST often mentions that some objects in museum, like those in private hands, may also lack provenance.
Even in museums, you find a lot of stuff that's from private collections, right? There's not everything has, like, we know exactly where it was found.
What museums own is 100% irrelevant here, because it's VST that makes claims that rely on objects being authentic, not museums. A museum is an institution that shows objects of interest to the public. As long as the item is labeled correctly, there is no obligation for an item in a museum to be authentic, only to be of interest. Many people have seen the Sutton Hoo helmet without realizing it's a modern replica. The original consists of a few corroded fragments, embedded in a modern plaster form. Some replicas are giant, like this cast of the Trajan column in the V&A Museum in London. Some museums show fake objects, like the crystal skull in the British Museum, because it's of interest to the public. Some exhibits are a hybrid of original parts and reconstruction, like the Ishtar Gate or the Pergamon altar. It's generally not an issue, as most visitors just want to see how something looked, whether it's fully original or not. But if you're making claims about manufacturing methods, your standards are higher than those of museums. You must demonstrate that the surface you're discussing actually traces back directly to ancient times and has not been modified since. Unfortunately, a private vase owner who wants to sell it can always have it touched up to get a higher price, the way people touch up their cars when they're being sold. People have noticed that vases in the Petrie Museum have rough surfaces, while the so-called precise, privately owned vases look pristine.
Well, the most surprising thing was the realization of how weathered and how beat up the objects in the Petrie collections were. Even when they look nice on a photograph, when you actually handle the object, you could see how weathered its surface was. So the objects really looked their age. They looked like they were thousands of years old because of erosion and various imperfections on the surface. And many objects were damaged too. And that was kind of the most stark contrast from the objects I've seen in the private collections. So the objects that are privately owned tend to be, much higher quality. In fact, many of them look like they've been made yesterday, which obviously, raises question about, their authenticity. They just, didn't look their age, whereas objects in the Petrie collection were, clearly much weathered and imperfect in that way.
Collectors pay the highest prices for the best-looking vases, precisely because they are the shiniest and the smoothest ones. Sellers are thus financially motivated to improve how a vase looks. If you're just displaying the objects, it's not a big deal. But if you're trying to make some technology claims, it makes a world of difference. Note that round stone objects like vases are unique, because making them smoother is a purely mechanical problem. Unlike with paintings, there's no need to know art history, match paints and brush strokes, etc. You just need a skilled machinist to shave off the thin upper layer of damage to make it look smooth. If you polish out any machining marks, no one will tell the difference. We know that steam lathes were used to forge antiquities in Egypt, likely as early as 19th century, including vases with lug handles. The crystal skulls were polished so well that traces of machining were found only in 1990s with SE microscopes. Among the scanned museum vases, we wanted to test if there's a difference in precision between vessels traceable to specific sites versus others. Turns out someone's already done it. As expected, vases not traceable to specific sites tend to be more precise. This means that pieces that got into museums from private hands may also have been touched up somewhere along the way. On this channel, we've been consistent what we consider an authentic vase worth studying. It's a vase verifiably traceable to a specific dig site. To finish this section, a few examples of how artifacts are touched up to get higher prices. Coins from big finds are chemically washed in bulk to make them look shiny. Maya ceramics are touched up with paints to make the decoration look better. In the most extreme cases, there could be no original paint left at all. Many Banchang pots from Bronze Age Thailand are found incomplete, so dealers and villagers combine parts for a more complete look. Just as this episode was about to be released, another video about vases dropped, so we decided to include some quick comments here. Comment 1. Mr. Young seems to have a very hard time reporting accurate numbers.
How many, again, have been scanned by these?
Roughly 100.
Roughly 100.
From museums, yeah.
And there's thousands of these things that are this precise.
Yes.
If VST scanned 100 museum vases, and maybe 50 more private vases, and definitely not all are precise, then how can you claim thousands of precise vases? We've already noticed Mr. Young's peculiar way with numbers back when he claimed indisputable provenance from a Czechoslovak ambassador in 1800s, when there was no Czechoslovakia. It's actually a bit puzzling how Mr. Young can keep his job in the finance industry, given his habit of fudging numbers in his favor. Comment 2.
My background's in math and statistical mathematics, and I work in finance.
If Mr. Young's background is in statistics, why did he promote the radial traversal claim, a product of obvious data dredging, now withdrawn by its author? Sounds like Mr. Young's background is in rather uncritical statistics. This radial traversal pattern was the linchpin of VST's claims that these vases were likely designed using computers by some unknown civilization.
It basically shows us that this vase was designed, and it was designed mathematically. It was also executed with just incredible precision to that mathematical design. Consistent microscopic precision implemented across 12 different radii with fixed ratios in granite is an unfathomable achievement. We find it in multiple vases. We find the exact same radial traversal pattern. That's one of the reasons that these were 100% designed with a Turing machine. They had to be. There's no other way to do it.
The claims of magic math encoded in these vases will likely now be memory holed, and VST will pretend they never made such claims. Comment 3. For years, VST insisted that hard stone vases were made by some unknown people before dynastic Egypt, while the soft stone vases, made by the dynastics, were of poor quality.
I often point to the industry of alabaster vessel manufacturing that emerged after the Third Dynasty. And by simply using your eyes, you can observe that they're not precision-made artifacts. They're out of round, they're not symmetrical, not balanced, and are certainly the product of relatively primitive handmade processes using flint or other hard stones. Yeah,
Even in the alabaster, you can see, because I have a few of those too.
Yep.
They're not perfect. They're from far away. They look round. When you get up close, you see that they're very far from being precise circles.
Yeah.
They're off center. The bases, the bases are not perfectly flat, so they don't sit perfect with the ground.
Right.
They don't sit perpendicular with the surface that they're on. There's quite a big difference, and so that I think what you're saying is spot on with the imitation versus the original.
This tune has changed instantly the moment precise limestone vases have been found.
Also limestone. So they even achieved similar accuracy in limestone. I don't know why.
It's just a wild guess, but maybe because dynastic Egyptians could make very nice vases in both hard and soft stone?
I suspect this industry is from before them.
So there you have it, folks. Per VST's new rule, if a soft stone vase is precise, it turns out it was also made by the unknown Predynastics. Otherwise, it would ruin VST's narrative, since dynastic Egyptians, per VST, were incapable of making precise vases. So, per this new rule, all good-looking dynastic soft stone vases are now reclassified as Predynastic on account of looking too good. According to Steen, when precise soft stone vases were found, Mr. Young tried to dismiss them or come up with a measurement approach that would obscure this. Finally, let's comment on the newly announced challenge.
The Artifact Foundation is sponsoring an experimental archaeology challenge. So there's a $25,000 prize to the stone carver, the experienced craftsman that's able to actually replicate one of these vessels close to what we've measured.
Problem A. We discourage anyone from taking part in any challenge, where the person who challenges others is also the judge of the outcome. It's identical to the so-called challenges issued by flat earthers, who offer money for a proof that the earth is round.
I'm offering a Bitcoin to anybody that can come up with one proof of the globe.
Take a shot from your airplane window, put it on your laptop, put a straight edge up to it, tell me if it's still curved. If it is, send it to me. I will quit Flat Earth tomorrow.
Of course, the challenge is never honored, no matter what you submit. That's because flat earthers are also the judge of the challenge, so they simply ignore or reject everything. For a challenge of this kind, to be honest, the money must be put in an escrow account, outside of the challenger's control, along with a list of unambiguous, unalterable conditions. Judging is done by an independent party, agreed upon by both sides. Problem B. Mr. Young comes across as a hypocrite. In 2024, he argued that production of such vases would be too expensive in ancient Egypt. For now, let's ignore his confusion of GDP with income and the anachronism of modern salary in ancient Egypt. Back then, Mr. Young gave $152,000 as an estimate for 2 years of labor to make a hard stone vase. Yet now, when he funds the challenge to make such a vase, the cost magically drops down to just $25K. As pointed out in the past, Mr. Young gives very different numbers, depending on what suits his current argument. Problem C.
We're not expecting sub 10,000ths of an inch circularity.
The most precise hard stone vase traceable to a specific site has a deviation range of about 1 millimeter. This is the standard for anyone concerned with real Egyptian vases. Nobody needs to reproduce any vase whose previous owners had a huge incentive to touch it up before a sale. Problem D.
The tools need to be true to the time period by which these are attributed to. So we're talking about Naqada, early dynastic Egypt. Stone tools, wood, copper would be fine.
This is not specific enough. Are any methods involving materials from that period accepted? Or can some methods be subjectively rejected? When asked about unconventional methods, Mr. Young gets a bit evasive and deflects to the submission process.
What if somebody was able to create something with some different methods? But what if like somebody was able to figure out some sort of like chemical, some unconventional method that you would have never thought of?
Well, we have a simple application process on our website. So submit that proposal and
What's the website called?
Problem E.
These people were not known to have had the wheel, so using the wheel or the lathe would be a violation of what they're attributed to.
This is false, unless by wheel you mean a wheel for transport, specifically. If by wheel you mean a disc on an axle performing some function, it had been known in Egypt since 8000 BC. Small discs rolling on an axle were used to make ornamental patterns on pottery 5,000 years before the first pharaohs. In First Dynasty mastabas, Emery found discs with a central hole, of unknown purpose, possibly toys. A disc spinning on an axis was known in both Predynastic and early Egypt, so you need to be very specific what you mean by wheel. Problem F.
Or revolving equipment. But right now, that's not what's attributed to any of these cultures. Their pottery was not made on a wheel. It was made by hand. They would pinch it and draw it in coil.
Again, much of it is false. While a full potter's wheel likely did not exist in Predynastic Egypt, simple rotating devices of some kind almost certainly did. Most of Predynastic pottery was made by coiling. But some pottery, as early as Naqada 1, shows concentric parallel lines, most likely due to the workpiece rotating on a turntable. Simple rotating devices most likely were known as early as Naqada 1, so why stipulate limits that don't apply? Let's now hammer home some key facts, as some people still seem misinformed. 1. There were no 40 to 50,000 hard stone vases found under the step pyramid by Lauer. Lauer found 30 to 40,000 vessels, the overwhelming majority soft stone, virtually all damaged. Based on Lauer's photos, less than 2,000 were hard stone. This is the total of all hard stone objects, not just vases. 2. None of the precise vases from private collections is traceable to a specific ancient site. 3. No matter how often VST repeats the word predynastic, the shape itself does not tell us if a vase is predynastic, early dynastic, or Old Kingdom. Note how this auction house honestly described this vase. Lacking context, the appearance fits anywhere between Naqada 2 and Khufu. 4. There's no evidence that Djoser tried to claim vessels from prior dynasties as his own.
If you go to the Cairo Museum, the new museum, if you look at those vases, sometimes they have the museum label, the serial number of those. I've seen one with 3 different labels. One was from the current museum and another one from the previous one.
Except overwriting old inscriptions is precisely what we don't see on Saqqara vessels. The original insignia are intact, with no attempts to erase or modify them by subsequent rulers. On some vessels, the inscriptions are actually in ink. If some ruler wanted to usurp these vessels or falsify the past, he could have easily removed them. What seems more likely is that Djoser collected the vessels from tombs, which were being robbed, to protect them under his pyramid. First and Second Dynasty mastabas in Saqqara were heavily looted. It's similar to how, later on, many mummies were collected in one tomb to protect them from robbers. 5. The hundreds, plural, of thousands of predynastic hardstone vessels exist only in the vivid imagination of VST.
Even though the nominal number is very high, it's in the many hundreds of thousands.
The number of known predynastic hardstone vessels is about 700, with maybe 1,000 or 2,000 extra items in private collections. Claims of hundreds of thousands of such vases are pure fantasy, meant to suggest mass manufacturing and some advanced high technology. In a past video, we showed a simple, back-of-the-envelope output estimate of about 4 hard stone vessels per year. This suggests a slow, tedious process, not rapid manufacturing with powered machines. 6.
There's good evidence that they may even stretch back as far as 12 to 14,000 BC, that they're in burials that go back that far in like southern Egypt, northern Sudan area.
There's precisely 0 evidence of any hard stone vases found in Egypt in sites dating to 12,000 BC or older. No stone vessels or even pottery were found in Toshka 8905 or other sites of that age. Only Stone Age lithic tools. All grave photos labeled Toshka, which show vessels, are from other, much later sites. These photos show pottery, not stone vessels. The only known photo that may show a stone vessel in situ is this unpublished picture by Petrie from Nakada, 4th millennium BC. The oldest stone vessels in Egypt are from the Badarian and Mahdi cultures, around 4500 BC. 7.
Everything else you find from these cultures, from these times, it's bone, it's beads, very primitive.
The Nakada culture created more than just beads. They built a huge royal mastaba with an elaborate palace facade, providing an art motif that lived on in Egypt for millennia. Their best sculpted stone and bone objects rival the quality of later dynastic works. They sailed and traded up and down the Nile. It doesn't seem like Nakada artisans would have trouble making hard stone vases. 8. Stone vases in Egypt did not start off perfect, and then declined in quality, as in the case of inheritance. The earliest cultures in Egypt that made hard stone vessels were Mahdi and Badarians. Mahdi vases look exactly like what you'd expect from people just learning how to make stone vessels. Badarian vessels look uneven and asymmetrical, with one nice exception. In Nakada 1 and 2, we still get many uneven pieces. It's really only in Nakada 3 and the early dynastic period that hard stone vessels reach peak quality. The chart of quality is not a decline from some imaginary initial perfection. The average quality had to climb over 1,500 years before it reached its peak. These are hard stone vessels from 4500 BC and from 1800 BC. If you claim that the quality of hard stone vessels declined since their beginning, you need to consult an eye chart. 9. The quantity, not quality, of hard stone vessels did decline after the Old Kingdom, but not because Egyptians didn't know how to make them. Here's why. This is a chart of stone types used in Egyptian vessels. The vertical axis is time. The Predynastic period is in yellow, dynastic period in light blue. Stone types with Mohs value higher than 5 are marked in green. Note how some types of hard stone, like gabbro, hematite, or agate, are only worked later, with no continuity to pre-dynastic times at all. If dynastic Egyptians did not know how to work hard stone, why does working hematite only start in the Middle Kingdom? Where were the supposedly inherited hematite vessels hiding prior to that time? The simplest, logical explanation is that working these stones starts later, because that's when Egyptians first came across these stones, or first decided to work them. This means it was the dynastic artisans who made them, which means they did have the ability to work hard stone. The same logic applies to new vessel styles. Why do hard stone libation vessels with sculpted faces start to appear only in the 18th dynasty? If they're inherited, why were they completely absent earlier? Again, a simple answer. Because that's when Egyptians began to make them. So why did the production of hard stone vessels decline after the Old Kingdom? It was the rich elites who bought the hard stone vases, not the commoners. These vessels were functional, but they really served as status symbols, to show off the labor cost you can afford. After the Old Kingdom, the tastes of the elites shifted onto other expressions of luxury and status, like more complex designs, faience, glass, pure precious metals, etc. The elites still spent money on status symbols, but on new kinds, subject to changing fashions. These new kinds are absent in pre-dynastic times, since the materials or skills had not yet been developed. The fact the advocates of ancient high-tech find the earlier labor-intensive hard stone vessels quote-unquote more impressive is completely irrelevant. It's the tastes of the rich elites which dictated what status symbols got made at what time, and these tastes are not obligated to follow anyone's opinion on what's quote-unquote more impressive. The production of hard stone vases declined, not due to a lack of skills, but due to the simple lack of demand by paying customers. Ask yourself, why doesn't anyone make the Fabergé eggs anymore? Because rich people aren't interested in them anymore. Rich people today spend money on space flights and other things. It's not a lack of skills that ended the Fabergé production, but the lack of demand. Let's conclude on a lighter note. Here's an early Egyptian vase with googly eyes made of ivory, added next to the lug handle. Turns out this joke may be 5,000 years old,